Hello, welcome back to Tech Type Podcasts, episode 10. My name is Simeon.
Hey, it's Ben.
And I'm Dale.
So this week on the podcast, it's all about 3D modeling. Pretty much, yeah, you would have seen it in every movie, every video game you've played. There would have been some form of 3D modeling. It's been around for quite a while. I'm not too sure when they first came out with 3D modeling. Would have been around the 90s.
I'm not exactly sure the first, but some of like the earliest stuff would have been Pixar's sort of...
Pixar, the original Jurassic Park.
That kind of...
So that was kind of where 3D modeling
really
originated
took
from.
off, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and it's built on from there. Obviously, at the moment, it's starting to really get incorporated into your virtual reality and all of your augmented realities. So Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook all have some form of 3D modeling. And yeah, pretty much every video game, all your movies, even down to advertising is all heavily 3D modeled.
Getting to a point now where stuff's looking real lifelike.
Yeah, especially in video games and movies, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, really crazy.
Even in industry as well. You look at like medicine, industrial purposes. It's really even starting to pick up with 3D modeling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's fascinating area. But we have a very special guest on today. We have an interview with Andrew Proctor, who is a 3D artist and real-time developer. So he basically works with a whole range of stuff from sort of gaming through to producing some very large 3D art and 3D art installations, as well as just some other bits and pieces that the company he works for can pick up in Canberra. So, yeah, let's fly into that. Let's see what he has to say today. Hello, welcome to the podcast, Andrew. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, man?
Yeah, not too bad. I haven't seen each other for a while, but it's good to have a chat to you today.
Yes, haven't seen many people for a long time, actually. So, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Quite novel. Yeah,
exactly. And, doing this over Zoom is one of those, things we're getting used to. Yeah, interstate as well, yeah. So a bit of background for some of our listeners. We grew up about 5 houses down from each other. And I remember when I was really little, I remember coming down to your place and sort of seeing some of your 3D modeling and 3D design that you were doing on Blender, and sort of you were attempting to talk me through it, even though I didn't quite grasp it at the time. But I remember thinking it was so cool and just sort of well out of my reach of knowledge at the time, and still perhaps out of my knowledge. But yeah, how have you been, and how is the whole 3D design going?
Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah, I've been doing it for so long now that it's just kind of part of, I don't want to say my identity because that's kind of like a bit sad almost, but yeah, it's good. Like it's kind of always what I've been interested in since I was a kid, like special effects and stuff. So yeah, getting into 3D was kind of a fate, I suppose.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
It's funny when you talked about when you first saw me getting into it, because I was probably just learning it then, and I was really good at it, but I was probably super novice at the time. So quite funny to think about that, actually. Yeah,
thinking back and sort of looking at some of those old projects and going, oh my God, I had no idea what I was doing. But
yeah. I try to open them occasionally just to update myself, and I'm like, oh my God, this thing's so unoptimized, open on hardware. So
I'm sure. So after leaving school, did you go straight into sort of that 3D modeling, or how did you get into it from when you were younger?
Oh, yeah, I was super lucky, actually. So I did a digital media degree at the Australian National University, and I ended up getting to the end. I did lots of animation and stuff, but I wanted to do honors. So I decided to come up with a video game project to do.
Yeah, right.
Which, was pretty, it was interesting because I didn't know how to program at the time, and I had to do the whole thing myself. So I had to learn that on top of the learning Unity and then all the 3D art stuff already.
That makes it a little bit difficult to sort of do the whole game from scratch.
Yeah, it was actually, I got a good grade, but it was a really bad idea for an honours project in a sense, because it was just so much work on top of all the work you had to do already.
Yeah, but of course.
From that, I knew one of my friends her brother actually was starting like a startup game company.
Oh, yeah.
Which was called, it changed names a few times. I think it's now called Fun Sponge.
Okay.
And they needed, ironically, they needed an animator on it, but I'm not an animator. But I was like, I know how that works. And most of the people they were working with were just starting at AIE, the Academy of Interactive Entertainment. So they didn't know much more than I did at the time anyway. So I was like, oh, well, I'll do the animations for you.
Yeah, I can learn that skill. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, and that was a really good kind of work experience. So I did that to just between graduating in December up until about May. I started a stint there. And it was actually really good. It was free. Like I didn't get paid or anything like that.
Yeah.
But because I had a bit on my CV, I managed to get a job like by June. So I had only like 6 months of not having a
that
proper
really
job.
helped out with that sort of
honors and
the
that
next step. Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah, which was really surprising because I kind of felt like I wasn't going anywhere because I was just working on random projects that were kind of out of my league at the time. But
so that sort of helped you guide you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really brought me back into kind of having a portfolio worth of stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so leading on from there, what do you sort of what job did you end up going into, and sort of what do you do now as a job? I guess.
Yeah, I got an interview for one of the only 3D places in Canberra, or at least one of the most established ones, I suppose. It's been around for over 10 years now, which is iCandy Animation. And the space they're in nowadays, in particular, they do a lot of ad space stuff, but it's also a lot of museums and apps, particularly for like government or institutions that want to educate people and stuff. So the kind of edutainment stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So my first gig was actually doing a bunch of this big screen, which was showing the Aboriginal calendar. It's hard to describe without seeing it, but it basically would run people through both the history and the lore and the mythology of how Aboriginal people could tell the seasons and how they could hunt based on that.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't a very big job, actually. They just needed someone to do it because one of the person who I replaced was on holiday at the time.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So, yeah, I kind of snuck in there. It was a really lucky break because
that's
they're
nice.
Not obviously hiring very often. So, yeah. So that's kind of what they do primarily is a lot of, as we'll talk about later, a lot of museum stuff and a lot of edutainment stuff, particularly mobile. Right. So, yeah.
And so just get a bit of an idea of sort of the structure of your team and where you fit in with that. So, like, is it a big team or how is that all broken up?
We're pretty much as small as you can get by having so many different fields. So our art lead is basically like a visual effects artist and compositor. We had another guy when I first started who did something similar, and then there was a programmer and me. Yep. And then there's administration and bosses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we kind of have a finger in every pot where we do a lot of game stuff, but also a lot of TV, ads, animation. We now have a full-time animator again. And we have a motion graphics artist who does like kind of text flying around and makes everything pretty far more than I can in a 3D sense. So we kind of do whatever comes up.
Yeah. So is that just taking like individual contracts and that sort of thing, or is it?
So we do lots of individual contracts, and because we're quite a broad set, we can kind of jump into any work.
Yeah, perfect.
But it also means that when bigger things like we can kind of handle the video parts, the graphic design, interactives, like all of that jazz.
And you don't need to sort of go out and freelance for any of that. You can do it all.
Yeah, no, it's pretty lucky. It's all kind of in-house, which is fun.
Perfect. Yeah, and I guess you get to sort of, being such a small team, it's quite tightly knit, and you get to sort of get to know each other quite well and each other's skills and everything. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of nice having people, we're not stepping on each other's toes as much because we're not doing the same things, but we can feed off each other. Like we can go to people and ask for help on things, or just a different kind of perspective that I wouldn't get if we were just all modelers, all animators or whatever.
Yeah. So you sort of get a bit of a different idea of different approaches to sort of the problems. Yeah, perfect. So I believe you did a pretty big overseas 3D project overseas in France, I believe.
Yeah. It was it was kind of funny. It was just as I got off my contract, they were like, "Oh, we're actually working on this really big job in France for basically similar to the Australian War Memorial, but just for the World War One French campaign, basically, which is the Sir John Monash Centre." Now, I've never been there, so I actually can't remember where it is in France, but it's...
neither.
Yes.
Couldn't tell you where that one is. There you go. Bit of a reference.
Yeah. God, I can't remember. Anyway, it doesn't matter really where it is. But it was to celebrate the centenary of, celebrate or commemorate the centenary of World War One, particularly the Australian efforts during the campaign. But what we were doing is it was an entirely digital museum. So there wasn't any artifacts in there because there's artifacts all around the place. So they didn't want to have it in the museum because it's kind of already a niche that's filled. Like you can just walk around and find bits of shrapnel and stuff.
See it all.
So what it was, we were working with a company called Wild Bear, who's a video production company in Canberra. And they basically subcontracted with us to produce all of the media for this entire museum, which was a huge undertaking. So there was visual effects because there's all narrative stuff. There was all this all the walls are these huge touchscreens, and each of them have their own video pieces or interactives, and you can all go through like hundreds and hundreds of pages of information and just learn about it. It's really interesting. And it was quite an endeavor to take on.
I bet.
For any company, I think. And it was quite an intense thing to kind of jump into as your first big role. And quite a sort of so hitting some of those big deadlines and sort of some bit of that time pressure comes into it as well. I imagine. Absolutely. And there's lots of so I went from quite stylistic stuff primarily in the beginning, like that Aboriginal calendar thing was very cartoony, to being like, oh, we need this tank and it needs to be fast enough to run in real time, like a game engine, but also needs to be good enough to run like in a pre-rendered V-Ray, like full 1080, well, not even 1080p, it's probably like 8K, 4K renders. Quality. And it has to be the same model, and you just have to produce multiple versions of it to get it to run, and you have like 2 weeks. So it was really hitting the ground running.
I bet.
It was a lot of fun though.
And so was it all screen-based medium, or was any of it sort of VR, AR interactions?
No, not at that time. So I do a lot of AR stuff on phones. But at that time for that museum, it was just screen-based. So a lot of touchscreen stuff, but no VR, AR. We've done a lot of VR stuff. Well, not a lot, but we've done some VR stuff more recently.
Since then,
which was a lot of fun because it's kind of an emerging market, and we're really trying to get into that space because it's really fun to develop for. It's also very challenging, but it's kind of nice.
I wonder what are the sort of challenges or sort of, I guess you sort of only really see the finished products as a consumer. And I've always wondered what, like, that sort of the difference between sort of seeing a 3D object on a 2D screen compared to seeing a 3D object in a 3D environment. How does that play into it more? So like, is it completely different techniques, or is it very similar techniques for producing them both? Or
you basically just have to be really careful with, I suppose the main difference is in VR, the person can look wherever they want to. So you can't kind of fudge it and be like, oh, well, no one's going to see the underneath of this car or something, so I just won't model it.
Yeah, of course.
There's no real room to kind of be like, that's not important, because the player can literally just stick their face into the thing. Like even I do it. I stick my face through the geometry just to see what it looks like on the inside, and it's all my face cold and broken. And also scale is the other thing that's really important. So we did a simulator where you had a gun, and you needed to basically, it was telling you like safety, but obviously if you get the scale wrong, as soon as you jump in there, you have like a cannon strapped to your hand. And it's when you're trying to be simulationist, it's not going to work. So, or it's too small and it's just like a water pistol. So things like that. Your height in the scene also really is quite jarring if it's wrong. A lot of that's taken over by just like we were using the Oculus Quest for it. But it's still things like that, like roof heights, wall heights, just the layout of things. It's really easy to get people lost when they're in VR as well. So kind of nothing can be left to just kind of be fine. It all has to be 100% perfect.
Yeah, I've played around a little bit with VR, and we've had a few chats with my mates on this podcast. And the thing I always found really fascinating is how different it is to like get you to, like, for example, look in a certain direction, and those noise cues that in movies and things is really easy because the camera just does it for you. You just look where the camera is. And in even sort of 2D games, it's sort of a bit different. But in VR, it's even more so because you can. It's a whole nother, adding sort of peripheral vision and all that comes into it, and sort of how to get people to go in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
I imagine is like very difficult.
User interface is just completely out the door. Like, has to be redesigned with VR in mind. Because the first time I ever played VR was actually at PAX in Melbourne many years ago, and I recall like putting on the headset and being like, "Oh, cool, I'm going to play this thing," and the guy's like, "Oh, you're out of bullets." Like the guy who's the developer standing with me. And I was like, "How do I know that?" And then realized that down in like my very peripheral vision in the top bottom left of my eyes, you could see like an ammo counter, and I was like, "That's no way you can do that in a game." Like, no
that's
one's
not right. How?
There. I just didn't think about it.
No intuitive sort of things.
Yeah, those kind of like those realizations kind of kick in when you're going to develop for it. And then, like you were saying, I even played like Half-Life Alyx recently, which is like obviously the best example of VR that's probably out there in a commercial market. And there was times where you'd hear something that clearly happened and you just weren't looking, and you're like, God, if Valve can't figure out how to do it, how am I meant to do it?
Yeah, that must be a bit sort of, but I guess those are all those learnings, and when that does happen, you go, okay, I need to warn people before these big things are coming.
Yeah, like I'm sure they have like some kind of raycasting thing where it's like, oh, the user's looking in this direction, cue something to happen, but obviously your head turns so quickly or you're not paying attention that
it's so hard for
away before it even starts. So
I bet.
Infuriating.
Yeah, so talking a little bit about sort of software, we mentioned before Blender is one of the 3D modeling softwares that are out there. Are you using that still, or have you moved to a new platform? What's the sort of standard for you and for the industry at the moment, I guess?
Yeah, so 3D modeling. At my work, everyone uses whatever they want, basically, which is so I know Maya quite well because I kind of always expected to have to use it for a job. And I do use it from time to time as well as 3ds Max.
Autodesk?
Autodesk. Yep. Both of those are by Autodesk. And then there's like ZBrush by Pixelogic and all the other little alternatives for modeling. Yeah, but I do primarily still use Blender.
Yeah, okay.
And it's been really interesting because it's kind of grown as I've grown. It is a tool in me as the artist. So it can do crazy stuff now that it's not really ahead of the competition, but it's really like neck and neck with them. Like the Eevee renderer, which is using real-time, kind of like Unreal Engine, but it's inside Blender, like that kind of photo-based rendering can be done in real time. Yeah, and basically has replaced the old school, like scanline rendering techniques that aren't. I'm trying to explain this
out of my field there.
Everyone will understand.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. It's the new way of rendering that's not like RenderMan, for example, by Pixar.
Okay.
Like it's not doing the intense lighting calculations, but it's so close. It's like high-end gaming, but that's a way of rendering now, which is actually what we used on the Sir John Monash Center, not in Blender, but in Unreal Engine, because it's so close. And the render times for rendering out something like we had to 60 frames a second, 8K.
The render height times would be way too high otherwise.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so Blender's really in that space now.
And Blender's a free software, I believe.
It is still free.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it's open source. You can crack it open and
look inside, which is brilliant for those sort of things. So do you think it's still those sort of softwares are keeping up enough with the industry and especially Blender being free, or are they keeping up with what you need to be doing, or is there sort of new software that is looking to come out soon or is looking interesting in this sort of industry at the moment?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like the kind of modeling suites have kind of like they're getting very good, but they kind of already serve their purpose.
Yeah.
So like they could just continuously get infinitely better, but a lot of the progression actually is more, for me at least, like in Unity or Unreal Engine or something like that. Those ones getting better and faster is kind of allows
so instead of the
us to work
3D
out magic
modeling
behind the scenes.
so instead of the actual 3D models being getting better, it's more about like the entire process.
Like in Unity currently, they just upgraded, well, not just, but I just got into it this year, of shader graph, which is using a nodal system, like how Unreal Engine does their shading. And it's just instantly, like overnight, changed how good everything looks, how well it runs. Like, well, it might not run any better because I'm just taking more advantage of it now, but you can get so much more juice out of it. And things like that are just huge. So when I was looking at the new Unreal Engine presentation showing like infinite geometry, render everything your eyes sees kind of technology, and I was just like, it sounds crazy because if you're going to put uncompressed models into a game, like I'm going to have to download that as the player. But if I'm not the player and I'm the developer, it's fantastic because I can just chuck anything into there and just have it run. So that kind of stuff would be amazing. It just cut out whole chunks of the pipeline, like baking and optimizing and retopologizing, all that jazz would just not be a thing anymore. So that's more important than what Blender or Maya could really give us, I think.
So sort of it's more a bit of a sort of the end of the line once the models are into the 3D space.
I think it's like it's only as fast as the slowest bit, and the slowest bit is still the end.
No, interesting. But as we chatted about before, the whole sort of haven't really been seen on the sort of COVID-19 pandemic. Has that affected you a lot in your sort of workspace and how you sort of approach your work? I mean, can you comment on that with your business in particular, or?
Yeah, well, my business, for me personally, it was actually kind of funny. I was sick for a whole week just before lockdown happened. So I was already at home working. And then the day I came back was the day that ACT got locked down. I basically went to the office, picked up my computer, and then left again. Back since. So I was very lucky. I think actually our industry, well, there's kind of two sides to it, because there's the film industry, which was like probably horribly hit because all the work is dried up. But then there's a lot of the people who can work from home, like in my kind of area in 3D, has been fine because we're all just kind of packed up and we're like, oh, well, working from home is basically what we do anyway. Like I don't need to be in my workplace except for security and to be on the server, but we have VPNs and all that. So it's actually been surprisingly okay for the time being. We're not out of it yet, but it feels okay.
Has it changed the way you interact with your with the rest of your team though? As in, like, because I imagine, sitting down for meetings and discussing things in person and being able to walk down the corridor with a USB or hand it over the booth. Has that changed, or has it sort of been like, you just send it via different forms now?
Yeah, there was a lot of growing pains when we first jumped into the system. It's pretty settled now, but there was a lot of, like, there's still things of like the VPN doesn't necessarily work for everyone for some mysterious reasons. So people are sharing stuff over different cloud management softwares, and then other people are working on the server at work, and some people go in because we need to test on hardware, and then other people don't. So it's not a perfect system. So it's been a bit interesting. The thing that's been hardest work-wise is kind of that thing we were talking about, not seeing your colleagues. The programmer I work with primarily, whenever we have a challenge on a project, like normally we would just sit down and nut it out, but it's so hard to do that online because I'm just like, this thing is broken, and then wait 10 minutes and he's like, oh yeah, I just saw this, and then bouncing back and forward and sending screenshots and of course, instead of just being able to like, hey, look at this. Exactly. And it's one of those things you completely take for granted until you're not with someone. You're like, I think it goes both ways as well. Like my art might break something, or the programming's being broken on my end and I'm trying to explain it, or because we're using GitHub, so we're all pushing and pulling stuff off there. It's really hard to tell if you've broken something or they've broken something because you can't see their machine at the same time, and you're trying to describe it to them. And they're like, I think mine's the same, even if it's not quite in those little tiny things that are breaking it. And like, is this specific area of the screen like glitching out like mine is on? It's very hard to know. Like you say, screenshots and be like, is this exactly what yours looks like? Exactly. It's like pixel perfect or what? So, And so. And your company's not thinking about staying online sort of after this? They're not thinking about sacrificing their
I have no idea, physical workspace? Or
it was funny because everyone at the begining, particularly higher ups, were kind of like, "Oh, nah, I don't know about this working from home." Like, just because such a change, and they pay for it,
of
so
course.
it's totally understandable.
Yeah,
but yeah, you do hear a lot more now of like everyone being like, "Oh man, I don't want to have to go to work." Like,
and
I just want to. I'm happy to work, but working from home is so good. You save money. You don't buy petrol. Like, so
and
it's
for the
kind
company.
It is hard. Like, I actually moved really close to my work, like recently, which is kind of funny. I haven't been there because I haven't had to, but
so
it is kind of that thing
could be
I might eventually go back in, but maybe not at the moment because it's kind of looking a bit bad everywhere at the moment. But yeah, maybe one day we'll go back.
Yeah, who knows? And I mean, possibly on a brighter side, or maybe not. Has there been any sort of new work? Ways of doing work or anything that sort of opened up new opportunities, or has it kind of all been a bit of that sort of hard to do sort of
do you mean because of COVID?
Yeah. So has there been any maybe new technology you've found that's gone, actually, this is actually working easier, or when we go back to the office, this will actually help a lot more? Or has it sort of just been trying to do those old routines sort of from the distance?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. I'm trying to think if anything's been improved. I've gotten better at working at home. So me as a tool, I suppose, has improved. But everything's kind of the same as it was. I'm much better at backing stuff up now because I'm terrified that my house will catch on fire and I'll lose all the work. Like when it was in the office, I'm like, well, the computer's in the office, it's fine. Like, if the files get lost, it's not really my problem. But now, because nothing's on the server unless I physically put it there, it's like quite terrifying. Yeah, because I don't work off the server anymore because it's so far away. So it would be massively laggy to try and, like even opening a Photoshop file from the server, if it's a PSB, can take like 20 minutes, and then saving, the VPN might drop out, or, just regular internet stuff. So
not only backups on your own computer, but backups.
Yeah, I'm like backing up backups and So it's been interesting.
No, that is a bit of a new world, I guess.
Yes, like new world of paranoia.
and being from home, it sort of is now your responsibility for it to be sort of safe and everything.
Yeah, and I'm like half working on my gear, like it's my screen, my mouse, my keyboard, but then it's the work computer under my legs.
Right,
so
that is like weird.
I need to remember not to install like random bits of software on the computer in front of me because it's not actually my computer.
Not actually yours. So what kind of computers are you guys running for your 3D artists and stylists?
We run Windows primarily. There's only one person at work who's a Mac user, so I think he does, like, he brings an iPad to work for do sketching and stuff like that. But primarily it's all Windows machines.
Are they sort of stuck with that? Are they like, you're more than welcome to use Mac if you want, or are they kind of like, no, we're a Windows based?
You can pretty much use whatever you want. We're remarkably flexible, actually. I was very surprised. Like my first job, I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to change like the way I work and what programs I use. But no, it's kind of been like, as long as you get the job done, doesn't really matter. But they're all pretty beefy Windows machines, particularly for me and the compositor, because we need to kind of do a lot of stuff on the machines. We also have a render farm at work. Which I don't have to use very much, which is good because I'm really bad at
is that
prioritizing.
Just a stack of GPUs, or?
Yeah, basically. It's like what people use for Bitcoin mining, but we actually use it for its intended purpose, which is to, spit out frames.
Yeah, of course. So have you guys jumped over to the new 20 series? Are you running 2080s and that sort of thing?
My machine below me actually is running a 2080 with the RTX card, and I haven't used it for any RTX now, which is just bugging me. But I did use it for Half-Life Alyx because I have a 1070 in my other machine, and I was like, that's just VR capable. But I was like, nah, I'm gonna hook it up to this.
Push it over to the other one.
Ran fantastically. So yeah.
Are you guys looking to go over to 10th gen Intels, or are you running Intels, or?
I actually have no idea. Yeah, the Intel's inside, but I don't know what generation. My machine is pretty new, so I must be running something like that. But I actually don't know. I'm not so much of a CPU kind of guy, which is kind of sad because the part is how fast it runs.
Yeah, well, exactly. But like you say, it's pretty much all modeling. So the GPU is the beefy bit. But
unless you're doing simulations, I think that's when it starts to slow down. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what sort of is the I guess daily routine of a 3D artist? What sort of, how do you set your day out in terms of is there particular things that you're modeling in the morning, and then this sort of thing, or is it just sort of pick up where you left off the night before and go from there?
It's mostly a pick up where you left off from the night before, but there is usually kind of a procedure with how we do things. So we'll normally have like, assuming it was one day was one project, we'd have the kind of concept phase of discussing what we wanted and how we wanted to look like. I'd normally mock up some stuff quite basically in 3D and be like, does this look good? And then we'd go from there, being like doing tweaks, then making a high resolution one, making textures for it based on some concept that's been made, and then spitting it out. So it kind of depends which part of the process you're up to, and that really depends what the day is.
And I presume most projects aren't single day, so it's sort of...
Oh, I would love if everything was a single day process.
Each individual day seems like... You know, you're doing a tiny part, but then when you look at sort of the months or multiple months.
I'm quite lucky that every day around like 4:35 is when I get stuck on something. And then by 8:30 in the morning when I start, I kind of like have the mental like, oh, I've realized how to fix
realize where you went wrong. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's more of my process than anything else. And then inevitably by the next day, I'll be stuck again. So
yeah. Well, look, there you go. That might be that's why it's the 9 to 5 working day.
The grind.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting tired towards the end and making those mistakes and sort of
pick it up where I left off.
Yeah, exactly. And come back with a fresh head the next morning. So for sort of some, not just young people, but people sort of getting into the 3D modeling space and even more so in your sort of space of 3D art. Is there any advice on? I mean, Blender's free is a perfect one to get started with. But is there any advice for websites to check out or areas to get onto and forums and things they should be looking at, or just particular degrees at uni they should be just guiding themselves toward? Or
that's a tough one. Like, I spend most of my time on ArtStation nowadays, which is kind of taken over like the CG hub. People posting art. I really enjoyed my university experience. It's not something that is required, but it does look very good on a CV. So I actually would recommend that to people.
Okay.
And also allows you to travel easier, but travel right now anyway. So maybe if you're just about to graduate, it doesn't matter too much. Sure. I think the main thing is just being really dedicated to your projects and wanting them to look very good. That's obvious, I suppose, but
but like giving sort of 110% to every single one.
Like really enjoy it as well, because that really comes through. Try and be, you don't have to be 100% original, but being kind of not doing the same thing everyone else is doing helps a lot. Do what you're interested in.
Right.
I think asking a lot of questions of other people as well. Most of my time, even now as a professional artist, is on Google typing in questions, trying to figure out the answers to things. I think
So on forums and blogs. Okay. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but ArtStation 80 level is good, although I've heard it's kind of controversial because they kind of rip stuff off other websites, but it's perfect for you as a user because it means you don't have to go to other websites. Yeah. You just go to the one and you get all the websites.
Users, it might be perfect.
I go on Blender Nation's pretty good, and there's a bunch of daily vlogs that one of the guys there does on all the new features. So you kind of keep up to date without really having to try. They're just like, 5-minute videos.
Yeah,
so,
cool.
Yeah.
We'll link to some of those websites in the description for anyone who is interested in those that 3D modeling sort of stuff and keeping up to date. But so where can we find some of your work at the moment, Andrew? Where's sort of the best place to look for your sort of stuff?
I think my ArtStation, which is I think it's just type in Andrew Proctor, AndrewProctor onto ArtStation, and I'll come up.
Okay, we'll grab a link for that as well.
I've got some new stuff coming. It's not all going to be as old as it is at the time of recording. I've been working on many projects. They're just not up there yet. So yeah.
Coming soon, we'll say.
Hit me up if you need to as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Unless there's anything else there's sort of in that space that is to talk about, or is that? I think that's about it. But all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
No worries. And we'll might have to have you on again soon if you have any big projects coming up or just after they release. If you want to have a chat to them about them.
Yeah, cool.
It'd be cool to have you back on. Thanks so much, Andrew.
Yeah, I would love it. Thanks, dude.
Cool. All right. Talk to you later.
See ya.
See ya. Well, there you go. Thank you so much for being on. And so what did you guys think about that? All the topics we discussed.
It's definitely a lot more involved than I thought. I kind of thought, 3D modeling, you kind of just open up Photoshop or Maya or something and, play around with this, play around with that, and bippity boppity boo, you got a 3D character. Yeah, no, it seems a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I found it very fascinating that sort of he was mentioning that the creation of the characters and the 3D art around that sort of hasn't changed a lot. Some new things have come in with textures and rendering, but it's really sort of like they've nailed that. But the end of the process, which is putting the game together or putting the installation together, has really changed a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, I think especially with VR, like you were kind of talking about in the interview, it's not only just the 3D animations anymore, it's the user experience you have to incorporate into your 3D designs and how the user is going to interact with the 3D model.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, thinking on even like a deeper level of, the cues that you might need in a VR game, like he was talking about the ammunition reloading in the game. It was in the bottom right corner. Even really fine stuff like that. It can make and break a game or an experience, and it's something to get right.
Yeah, something I just never even considered was the height of the player looking into the scene in VR. Yeah, just little things like that.
That's crazy.
Never would have considered that, really, how off-putting it would be to just be a little bit shorter, a little bit taller in the game and looking at stuff.
Well, I don't know if there's a standard sizing for sort of, mouse and computer gaming, but I don't know if they have a height for characters or if those change a lot.
I've got no idea.
Yeah,
I assume it's kind of like average human height, unless you're playing some bizarre character
game or something. Yeah, I don't know. I would presume COD and things have their standard sort of soldier height or something, but who knows where they get that all from. But I mean, that's, talking about all that, that's a very, very high level of animation and game creating and sort of 3D modeling and 3D design and very that high tier, millions and millions of dollars being pushed into those sort of projects. Have you had much experience with 3D modeling and creating 3D art and stuff, or in this sort of area?
So I've done a little bit. I played a little bit around with Maya and Photoshop. Kind of still at the point where I open it and you see, 30 different features in one drop-down menu, and you've got all the bars on the side. It's kind of a bit overwhelming. But, you jump, he kind of talked about it a bit in the interview, but you jump on the forums, you jump on YouTube, look at some videos, and once you kind of get the basics down, I found it's not too bad. Kind of once you get over the first kind of shock of the UI design and how many features that you can have access to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially with some of those, I've only really, like you say, played around with Maya and a tiny bit Blender, but I think it's the amount these software and these programs can do, which is just oh my God. I mean, obviously you're like, okay, well, you've got to be able to create shapes and, spheres and cubes and stuff and manipulate them to create arms and whatever. But then, you get down to skeletons and so how they move and the muscles and things like that. And then, and you go, okay, so you don't just want a gray shape, you want to texture it. You go, okay, that kind of makes sense. But it's just the amount of different paths you can take to create a character or a lamppost or a building. It's when you sort of step back and think about it, you're like, okay, you have to have that many different approaches because there's just so many different types of objects in the world. But you go, oh my God, how could you possibly ever learn that much stuff? How could you find that many things?
Well, it's software. It's exactly the same as kind of what a lot of software engineering, computer science students and experts, professionals in their fields talk about is you never really learn all the syntaxes. You never really learn what each button does, but you learn what to search for and you develop that way of thinking that you can go and do research on what you want, and you're able to find the right answer, like you guys were talking about. He still, goes onto Google and does a ton of searching and researches how he's going to build a certain type of animation. And I think that's more important to having a successful career than just memorizing all the syntaxes off the top of your head, or memorizing how to build a certain animation.
Absolutely. And I suppose like you would sort of learn your way of doing things, and maybe it's not the fastest, maybe it's not the most efficient, but it's the way you feel comfortable in producing a alien's leg or a monster's ear or whatever they're doing in that particular part. And it's sort of like, this is the way I do it, and that's the way I feel comfortable. One thing I did find very interesting that we talked about was that his company doesn't mind what software they use and what computer.
That was really interesting. I thought there'd be a massive compatibility.
I would have thought.
I guess they kind of all export in the same format, but
yeah, I suppose so. But I would have thought, you walk in, you're running your iMac, you're running Maya, and you're running this, and that's it. That's your sweet.
Yeah.
But no, they were more than happy as long as you get the work done, as long as your output is an OBJ or a these other file types for 3D design. It's kind of like, you guys do whatever you want as long as the product.
Yeah, I guess that's the beauty of standardization. And I guess as a business or a company, it'd give them great flexibility. You're not being tied to just one system or one OS or one piece of software.
You see that sort of flexibility with like Google employees. Google will let them use whatever the hell they want. There's a few things that they don't use, like they'll ban a few apps, but generally, from what I've seen, they can use whatever they want. Mac.
Yeah, and from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense, because you're not retraining someone on a completely new system. It's like, right, you're a Maya expert. Great, we're not going to train you on anything else. If you're good at that, then just here's a computer, or here's your desk, get to work.
Get to work, yeah. I think it would absolutely take out that, like you say, those weeks and weeks of training that some of these other, completely different industries, absolutely, but these other companies have to do. And I'm sure they have their sort of standardization in terms of naming particular things and sort of those sort of things. But yeah, the modeling, I mean, it doesn't matter if your model comes out of Blender or Maya or 3ds Max or ZBrush, as long as it looks how it's meant to look and behaves like it's meant to behave, it's sort of like, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I'm a little bit sort of, I don't know, maybe it's
a bit shocking
fixed way of thinking, and maybe that's the wrong way of thinking. Absolutely, it sounds like, for this industry, but I guess that's one of those beauties, like you say, of sort of IT in general, is that, as long as the file format comes out the way it should and can be read by other software, it doesn't really matter if it, is produced on this or that. But yeah, I wonder who sort of, what company, possibly Google being sort of one of the older ones, who went, why do we have to retrain these people? Like, just let them use what they want, whatever code language. Yeah.
I think it's even less about like retraining and more just like use what you're comfortable with. Better worker satisfaction, probably better product if they're familiar. And if the end product is compatible, I guess it's good.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind getting sort of back into a bit of 3D modeling, but I haven't sort of touched it in ages. But maybe it's the kick I need to sort of kick off that sort of Maya little spur again and do a bit more 3D modeling. And who knows, look, for this 3D printer we're building, Ben, we might need to be doing some 3D modeling quite soon.
Yes, very true.
Oh, well, excellent. Well, great to talk to you today, boys. And thank you so much for Andrew for coming on. But yeah, we'll catch up next week for another chat on the pod.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
All right. Talk to you boys then.
No worries. Catch you
later. Bye, guys.